Welcome to Shaping E-commerce with IronPlane. This is where we talk about e-commerce development, solutions, digital marketing, and all things e-commerce. Be sure to check out the description below each video to find additional resource links and show notes. We upload new videos each day. Please like and subscribe to our channel.
Welcome back to Shaping E-commerce. I'm Tim Bucciarelli, Director of Engagement with IronPlane. And today we're continuing our conversations about how to get the most out of your e-commerce agency. And you probably have heard the name Isaiah Bollinger before with the company Trellis. And he's joining us again today to talk about e-commerce agencies and the client and agency relationships and how to kind of optimize that experience for both parties. So Isaiah, thank you very much for joining us again today.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. I always like kind of getting, knowledge out there via video and conversation. I think I used to do a lot of writing. To be honest, I haven't done as much like personal blog posts and writing. It's time consuming and be frustrating. I think it's almost better to get content out this way. So
and you're getting word out on LinkedIn. So I'm following you on LinkedIn. So that interaction is actually but it's also nice because you get a lot of interaction. So I've been enjoying LinkedIn recently as well for that. But I question whether it's all like industry people or is it actually merchants who can actually learn something by watching.
You get some merchants. I try and connect with merchants. Some will accept, some won't accept my request. So I try and build those connections that way, and you get some for sure. And you also get merchants that go to agencies and agencies that go to agency folks that go to merchants. So I think you kind of over time it balances out. Yeah.
So in our agency conversations, we've been talking a lot about, the nuances of getting the most out of your agency in terms of how to respectfully engage with your agencies, what you should be realistically expecting from your agency. One of the things that you've mentioned on LinkedIn actually is really the question as an agency, how you can best serve your clientele. And it sounds like some agencies are kind of niching down and other agencies are broadening out their view of how they can support their clients. So talk a little bit about the position Trellis has been taking on that and how that's changed your dynamic.
I think it definitely depends on your size and your scale, and also the owner and maybe the executives or the main partners skill sets. We started by niching down, and I think especially when you're small, you kind of have to niche down, right? Like it's pretty hard to operate, I think, a full service or a broad set agency when you're 5 people, right? I mean, that's going to be really hard to do, I think. There may be a way where you could kind of manage it through outsourcing, right? Kind of be like the full service managers of the client, and then you outsource to various experts. But I think you're going to have almost impossible time executing on full service in-house when you're 5 people, and then managing a bunch of third parties is going to be challenging. So I think partly depends on scale, right? When you're small, I think you should niche down for the most part. There's always going to be some outlier, weird exception, right? But and that's what we did. We actually started out broad, and then I realized hey, this is just too much. It's not working. I can't be the expert on everything, or I just didn't have the team to do everything. So we niched down and focused on Magento. And this was back in 2012. Actually, Magento and WordPress. So, we knew we had the PHP knowledge, and it's WordPress kind of covered some content use cases that would pop up, and sometimes clients would want Magento and WordPress because maybe they had a content site, and then a Magento, or we even did some of the, I don't know if you remember the fish pig days, or it still exists.
Oh, yeah, it's still around.
So we did stuff like that. But we niched down, and then I think the reason that we've gone full service is as we've scaled, we just felt like it was really hard to scale, just mostly being a development shop, right? We did take on Shopify, we did take on BigCommerce. We also feel like Shopify and BigCommerce have taken over so much of the market, and they're continuing to take over more of the market with SaaS, and it's just such a lower cost of ownership that creates a smaller need for development, or a client can get away with maybe an in-house front-end dev, right? Or an in-house front-end dev that maybe does some other stuff and crosses over into e-com management. We're seeing actually a lot of that, right, with these Shopify BigCommerce clients. And then it's like, where do you fit in as the agency, right? They might have like ad hoc projects, but that's not a great, I think as an agency,
not much that you can depend on in terms of recurring revenue.
If you can't build recurring revenue, I mean, it's going to be really hard to scale your agency, right? I mean, I don't know of many agencies that have gotten fairly large by just doing one-off projects. And so we felt like, one, they just needed more help with strategy, marketing, we also felt like there was this silo where there'd be like, the SEO guy, the ads guy, the client would do some stuff. And then you have like like ERP people, like you have all these like silos, and it creates, I mean, I'll give you an example. We have a client where we just took over some of their marketing stuff, and they're on the smaller side for us. So, I told them, let me just kind of stay in my lane for now as we kind of adapt and to their business. And he had, had some other folks help him with development stuff, and they broke all the tracking. They broke all the marketing tracking. And I think it's starting to kind of become clear that like, yeah, maybe we're probably a little more expensive than like whatever freelancers or people he used, but like it's actually going to save him money by not having us come in, bail out, fix all the tracking, and like, and so that's where this full service element comes in, because we can kind of look at everything and say, what are the actual most important problems that we need to fix, and take that kind of like bird's eye view. There's a lot, I mean, he actually came to me for things that weren't, in my opinion, his biggest problem. And so I said, like, let's take a step back. We could do that, but is there going to be any ROI there? Maybe, maybe not. But here's where I think I can get you like some pretty high ROI.
So when you think about a kind of just definition wise, when you think about because the name full service or the title full service is thrown around a lot. Give me an idea of what it means to you, because I think it does vary from agency to agency.
We're honestly not truly full service yet. That is our vision and our goal to get there. And I'll explain the missing gap, that we have like partnerships and we kind of like guide that piece, but we can't actually do it all in-house. Right now, we're kind of positioning full services. Look, we can help you with all acquisition, generating traffic right across the major channels, ad spend, SEO, email. I mean, really, it's actually not that many channels, right? You have affiliate, ad spend, SEO, email, and direct brand traffic, and referral traffic is honestly usually a byproduct. It's really a byproduct of PR and SEO, right? And so we cover acquisition, then we cover all creative and including like packaging design, brand, logo, all of that. We started very UX focused, and then we've kind of brought in and learned a lot about like the overall branding. It's actually been amazing, because you start to realize like, oh wow, like some of these end results are way better when we can just tweak the brand. Because when the brand sucks, the UX is limited by the brand, right? And so we've been able to come in and offer like sometimes very modest packages of brand that's not necessarily like a complete overhaul, but like a minor overhaul that then carries into the UX. So we kind of like think of it like all engagement conversions. It's like all brand creative kind of development on the front end, right? The e-com site, what they see, how they buy, until you get to essentially checkout and thank you page, right? What's all the flows, everything that requires the client to get to, successful transacting online. And then you have what happens after that. And that's the part that I would say like we aren't truly full service yet, because it gets pretty complicated and diverse. And that's where like, okay, post fulfillment or post order, it's like, okay, now we can help with the order management and all the integrations. We can pretty much double down on all the integrations, help them architect most of the back office systems. But there's definitely a layer within the back office systems, the ERP systems, the accounting systems, the warehouse management systems. Especially when you start to get into like, the larger scale businesses, it gets pretty complex, right? So, we've been building out more and more partnerships with experts in those spaces, NetSuite experts, Sage experts, Infor. We have a really deep partnership with an Infor expert, Infor shop. And then we have a guy we've been building a relationship with who's kind of the agnostic, like, thought leader / architect leader of like enterprise architecture, who's kind of a free agent, which is actually unique, because the problem is a lot of these guys only can do one or two. So if your client's not on one of those two systems, or if you partner with them and they're not on those two systems, they're not going to help that client. So he can kind of come in and give you like the objective bird's eye view of like, oh, maybe they're on the wrong systems, or here's how we might kind of like optimize what they have. So that's definitely the area that I would say, like, if we were to be truly full, and I don't know if anyone can truly be full service there, right? Because you start to, and I was talking to this guy about that, you start to get in these political ball games about who's the system of record or the agency of record for the ERP. And if you do one or two, you can't do some of the other ones. And it becomes this really complicated, political ball game of dealing with these back office systems. So I think for now, we're kind of playing the quarterback role from like a growth perspective. Like, how can we help them leverage these systems to grow? But like, we can't actually like do all the work. Like, we're not going to like do all your NetSuite development or do all your, they're going to need some of their own IT staff or like a VAR on that side.
And when you made this decision, I guess I have two questions. What was the kind of staffing point at which you were like, okay?
I want to add the last the final. Okay, so there's that. Let's say that completes all fulfillment and accounting and the orders and the inventory. Then we look at the analytics and the business intelligence of analyzing all of that, and then retention, which is really just kind of like email lifecycle marketing, and that's
customer support,
right? Yeah, and customer support. Really, it's like, do you want Zendesk or Gorgeous? But anyway, so I just wanted to kind of like finish that story, and that's kind of how we look at like full service and helping them with all of that. But obviously, like, actually doing all of that in house is, going to be hard for us to do every possible.
Yep. So I guess I was curious to know, as an agency, at what point were you like, okay, we reached 25 staff, we reached 50 staff, we reached 100, 200
staff, right? We started realizing like, hey, we need to become more full service. We need to, expand our creative capabilities beyond UX. We need to expand our marketing capabilities. I'd say it was about the 50-person size.
Yeah.
When, especially also just getting deeper into Shopify and BigCommerce and kind of realizing like, hey, look, there's only so much developments. Like, after we launch, like, some of our most successful projects are so successful that like the client doesn't need that much post-launch maintenance, because the site is pretty, like, we make it modular, so you can kind of like drag and drop sections to build new pages, and like, installing apps isn't that hard, right? So all, you kind of like build yourself out of a job.
It's really interesting. I mean, that is very good point, because SaaS projects have proliferated over the past 10 years, and they've taken so much of the on-prem business now that agencies who were formerly on-prem are running into exactly that situation. And IronPlane ran into this as well, where we were like, okay, well, if we take on the Shopifys or the BigCommerce or the other SaaS platforms, there's a slight risk of becoming a job shop, where you take it on, you do the implementation, and then it's really between the SaaS platform and the merchant. There's not a huge amount of room. Yeah.
Maybe they get a freelancer, because at that point it's like, they don't want the overhead of an agency. And, the reality of being we're about 70 people. We actually cut down a little bit. We've been trying to get more efficient, more lean. The economy's obviously not been amazing. And that we grew so fast that I think when you grow that fast, you kind of create these inefficiencies, and you kind of look back and you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best idea in those areas. But we're about 70-ish people, right? And so at that size, you're going to be more expensive than a freelancer. Like,
yeah,
there's just
for sure.
like, yeah, there's a lot of value with what we do, right? Obviously, there's value. But, let's say you want to just like get a couple little things done. Sometimes I'm like, look, go get a freelancer. Like, I'm not going to try and sell you on doing that. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And when you think about, from the client's perspective, what do you think are the kind of decision points that they need to make? Should I be going with a really targeted agency who specializes in this one particular field? Or what's the benefit of going with an agency that does offer me a little bit more of the digital marketing services in addition to the development?
Well, yeah, I think it depends, right? I think if you're very confident you need to solve that one specific problem, it might make sense to just get a specialist at a good cost that can kind of like come in and like it's like a house, right? Like, do you need someone to like just do the plumbing and be really good at that? Like, you probably want to go and find like, maybe a smaller, expert level plumbing, business that's not too expensive, but they're just really good at fixing that thing. But you want to build a giant house, and market that house and get, people to rent the house. It's like, now you probably want someone that knows how to like build the whole house. And we stay in our lane, right? So like we are positioning ourselves full service pretty much exclusively around Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento. Just we've been doing it for so long, or Adobe Commerce. I still call it Magento / Adobe Commerce at this point, and then headless. So we kind of like break it up into like four technical buckets, because that kind of like powers the center of their digital kind of like front facing business, right? And so I mean, there are things that we're not probably the best fit. We are like starting to kind of like explore Salesforce, but I mean, at the moment, we're not like a giant Salesforce shop, right? So I think that if you take your time and search around, you could find someone that's, let's say, full service in quotes, because there's always like a caveat, but maybe they specialize in some of the core like areas that you need fixed, right? Or the things that you think are the biggest problem.
We considered, we were in that boat which you were describing, where we had a smaller team, and we were like, okay, but we definitely want to move and help our clients with this digital marketing services. And we realized very quickly that we were not at the scale to really do that properly. So we actually backed
honestly,
out of that.
Yeah, the marketing division we've been building since 2018, and I feel like it's like just hitting its stride. Like, it's been like a 5-year up and down. We had like some amazing success, then we had like one of the most ridiculous failures that you could imagine. Maybe it's a good just podcast story where our biggest account, we had scaled them from 10 to 50 million in essentially a year and a half, which is like, I think it was a little bit of the, Facebook and some of the stuff hadn't quite gotten super diluted yet. And they were kind of like a trendy product, and our team was just doing well. And one guy deleted by accidentally, Facebook. And I think people that are deep into the Facebook world would know this, like 3-4 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, Facebook used to have edit and delete next to each other. And so he by accident hit delete on a campaign. They actually have since changed that. It's now much more difficult to delete a campaign. Like, of course, I'm sure people like complained and they fixed that. So anyways, he immediately restored the campaign to the exact same requirements. It's like, let's say you had a bad deployment for production, and then you just like rolled it back, and happens, right?
Yeah.
But the client like blamed us for, some bad tailwinds. I think, some of the magic that was things weren't getting diluted in the market yet were starting to appear in the market, and they blamed us. They blamed that one thing on some of the bad tailwinds for the business. And so that was a rough hit when you're like kind of building a new division. So funny story there, but anyways, maybe it was like a good thing, and that it kind of like forced us to, innovate and rebuild some aspects of the division. And now it's actually our fastest growing division right now is marketing.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent.
But it was like 5 years of building, like basically incubating a business within our business, and like it was very difficult. Yeah.
So when you think about a merchant, a business, let's say a mid-sized to emerging enterprise type business, they're keen to maybe re-platform, let's say, because that's a common idea for many businesses these days, and they're looking to hire an agency to help guide them through that re-platforming. And also, ultimately, let's say they're leaning towards one platform or the other. Like, what are some tips or recommendations that you would give to a merchant or a business who's trying to find that right agency for their own business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's about having alignment, right? Like, I think sometimes clients should just work with a freelancer. And I've had folks that are like, have a family, right? They start a little, merchant business, and I was like, look, I think we're just going to be like too big right now for you guys. And it's just like not, I think like here are the specific things you need to focus on. Go find an expert in those specific things. And maybe it's 3 different freelancers, right? So I think that I would actually look at it as like, sometimes you need a freelancer, right? And that's the agency business is really just a giant freelancer business, right? With more organization and expertise, right? But it's at the end of the day, you're paying someone for time. They could hide the time, they could flat rate it, there's a million ways that you can charge for your time, but ultimately you're paying for their time. You're not buying a product, you're not buying a physical good, right? So anyways, I think the first step is like, is a freelancer going to solve your problem? And in some cases, I think it will. But I think in a lot of cases, it'll expose very quickly that you need an agency. and, holy crap. I mean, the biggest risk with a freelancer is, let's say, they're maintaining your website and they go get a job. Most freelancers burn out and they're not going to last, right? And they're not salespeople, right? The hardest part about
full stack. I mean, in our experience is primarily Magento. So usually when I have these conversations, I'm really talking with that as the context. But like a full stack developer, you hire a full stack freelance developer and you feel like you're good because you got front end, you got back end, you got DevOps, you got. But the reality is, those are kind of specialized fields if you have some complexity.
Yeah, it's unlikely you're going to find someone that's like really good at front end, back end, and DevOps and all the things. And if you do, they're probably going to go get a job somewhere or get like insanely high pay if they're that good, right? And you're not going to be able to retain them probably. So that's an issue. And then or you have to split it up on front end, back end. We even split off DevOps a little bit. QA we split off a little bit just because it's not always great to QA your own work. Probably it's not. Project management, right? I mean, then and most clients suck at project management. Like, let's be honest, right? Most merchants just aren't good at project management. And so that's another skill that's underrated, right? So I mean, that's why I think, you have to be really smart about how you do that. I mean, I think that works more so, probably not very well with Magento, but maybe like, let's say Shopify, because you could probably, let's say you just need to like rebuild your theme or tweak your theme, like that could work okay, right? I mean, a lot of times freelancers are going to cut corners. They're not going to do everything through Git. You lose them. There's no one knows what's going on after they've left, because it's highly unlikely they're going to stick around for more than 6 to 12 months, right? It's a big risk. It's a huge risk, right? But sometimes when you're small, you have to take that risk because you just don't have much money, right?
Right.
And then I think you go up the next chain, which is like the smaller agencies, maybe the 5 to 20 person agencies, somewhere in that range, where there's a little more stability. There's a little bit more, something there where, you have some project management, you have some infrastructure, but you're not necessarily, dealing with, the larger agencies that might just be kind of like too much overhead. And then, then you kind of get to our size where, I think especially for mid-market clients or even smaller clients, what we see is where we're most effective is we can help them with the more full service. Like if a small client only needs us to do one like very little thing or a few little things, it's like, are we really the right fit? Probably not, So that's where like the full service comes into the smaller clients, especially on like Shopify and BigCommerce. So I think it's all about finding the right size, but also like going back to your point, are they experts in Magento? Or you definitely don't want to. Magento is a good example of like if they haven't done Magento for 10 years, like you probably don't want to hire them.
Sea change over the past 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you're finding alignment, one of the things I come across, there are 2 ways I come across this. One is people coming to us and saying, hey, I'm looking for an agency. I can see that I can go through Upwork, or I can find this agency in Thailand for, $55 an hour. What are your rates? And so that as a conversation opener from a merchant, as an agency, I immediately hear, okay, this is very budget focused, very like, it's not a good fit. Like, and then the flip side of that is a year later, we might get a call from that exact same company saying, I don't know what to do. I've put in $40,000 with this agency. The site is still not launched. We can't get it launched. It's not doing what we want. I don't know what to do. Can you help? And at that point, it's like, well, are you still looking for an agency for $55 an hour? Because that's kind of what caused the problem.
Well, I think it's good. Let's talk about the rates. About the rates. I think that the rates, from my experience, there's no magic sauce, right? You might be able to, we might be $10 an hour or $20 an hour more than a smaller agency, sometimes more, right? But if someone's $55 an hour, you're essentially hiring offshore direct development.
Yeah.
Like what you're doing, and I don't think clients understand this. So if you're paying anywhere between, let's say, $20 to $75 an hour, you are not hiring a real agency. You're essentially hiring developers, workers, like you're essentially hiring staff augmentation.
Yep.
And if you're hiring staff augmentation, that means you need to be the general contractor. That means you need to be the master builder that can facilitate the guy to build the bathroom and the guy to build the kitchen. And if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, you're fucked. Like, I'm sorry to be like blunt about it. I don't know, like, hopefully we're not going to get censored. I think we're not on like media here. So, but I think it's important to like get that point across, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're doing. If you're paying those kind of rates, you're paying staff augmentation. You're not paying for a real agency overhead. So an agency is going to have to charge you in the hundreds to even 200s an hour. So now once you get to the real agency, you're probably talking at least 125, 150 an hour, because you're paying for some US salaries. They have some non-billable roles, probably like me and you, right? Like we're probably not the main billable people.
Yep.
So you have to cover non-billable roles plus billable. Their billable cost of goods sold might be $50 an hour, $60 an hour, right? Because they have some US developers and maybe they have a couple offshore developers, but even still it adds up, right? And we're seeing offshore rates get kind of ridiculous, right, with some of the good folks. So now, like when you're actually paying an agency, you're definitely most likely like 150 to 250 an hour. Like let's say somewhere in that range. I think above that, like you're paying for Accenture and you're probably overpaying.
Yeah.
You should, or maybe you're just paying for some crazy specialized, like where I've seen like the crazy rates is like the guy that knows how to do this one ERP thing that like no one else knows how to do, right? Where it's like he can charge like $400 an hour because it's like the master electrician that only he can fix that light that like doesn't exist anymore, But generally, I think the rates for an agency are going to be, let's say, like it's a wide range, 150 to 250, and we flex our rates because, if you spend $1 million a year with me, I might be able to do 150. If you want to do hourly, I'm going to charge you 200, 250, right? Like if I don't think that there's potential, right? So we kind of like flex our rates in that range because the margin has to be high for us to take on the risk of like no commitment. And so anyone that's charging less than really like probably 150, you're not even a real agency, like, or they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you're going to, I mean, cause I was there, I know how, I remember when we like had to go from like the 100 to 125 to 150. And I feel like once we got to like the 150, it was like, all right, we're a real agency now. And I'm not 23 years old anymore, and so I think that those people, if they're not like great, maybe they're a CTO or maybe they like formally ran an agency or they know what, like I could do that. I could go get those 55, 75, you know what I mean? But sorry, but the average merchant just, it's like, have you built a house before? And you're going to go out and like hire the $20 an hour guys to like do each piece. Pretty risky.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor for that. I completely agree. It's like hiring your general contractor and paying 20 to 50% more, probably 20, 30% more actually than
there's
what
a reason.
do. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. And again, for merchants when they're assessing the alignment, let's see. When you're assessing alignment based on past projects, how much weight should you be putting in that? Like the case studies, like how much does it matter if an agency is kind of dialed into your specific industry?
I think it matters a lot. Yeah, I think it matters a lot. But I will say that I think there are times where people put too much weight on that. and they want it to be like my exact industry, my exact use case. And it's like, look, we've done, at Trellis, we've probably done 500 e-com sites if you include, our acquisition of GrowSpark, and they, did 1 million Shopify sites. And so a lot of those are smaller sites, right? So it's not, but let's say we've probably done 200 medium to large sites, right? It's like, yeah, maybe I have a site that's similar, or I have some use cases that cross over. I think it's okay that sometimes we run into a use case where it's like, it's not exactly this thing. Like, we come across these like weird MLM, multi-level marketing use cases, but like, look, we've done e-commerce, we've done all the other things, and we've done things that have some relevance that we can do this, right? Like we're not going to, so I think like depth and breadth of past experience matters more than like, and as long as it's close enough, then like, oh, we did this exact same project, and we're going to copy and paste. Like you don't want the guy to copy and paste your project. And if he is, like, that's like a modular home. Like, yeah, maybe, is that really what you want?
Yeah. Yep.
So,
yeah.
And I'm sure you get that. Right? Like, oh, you haven't done this exact thing. And it's like, well, we've done all these other things that have some relevance here. Like your developer's going to figure it out,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely some skills that you can apply if you've done the same integration with a particular platform before. Like there are some nuances and complexities with some of those integrations that really, if you've done them before, it can really make your time much more efficient, I think. But generally, a lot of the development work can be applied in one scenario and then in a totally different scenario down the street.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up, I'm curious to hear your point of view. Two different sides of the same coin. What's your idea of like a really good client? And what's your idea of what a merchant or business would expect in a really good agency? So whichever one you want to start with.
Great question. Yeah, I think a really good client is generally someone that understands the agency business model. They understand there's some overhead. They understand the value of project management. They understand the value of QA. So they understand some of these, let's call them like intangible roles. Let's call it the role players. Like, I think a lot of clients come in and it's like, oh, I only want to pay for LeBron James, but it's like he needs, his roster to win the game, right? And he's not going to be the best at every possible position and thing that he does, right? And so I'll kind of answer by explaining the bad clients think like, oh, I only want to pay for the exact amount of like high value development work or whatever, but they don't understand. And the good clients understand that to get that high value development work, you need some project management, you need some requirements capturing, you need some, and those cost money, those are conversations, those are meetings. We can get maybe more efficient over time, but there's overhead associated with the process of development and marketing, and it's not just the doer, coding all day, right? Yep. And usually those are people that have been through situations where they've had poor requirements capturing or poor strategy or poor kind of like general contracting mindset involved. And so they're happy to kind of pay for that cadence of sprint planning or project planning or, that kind of thing. Right. Yep. And yeah. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, it does. Totally. And I think that one of the things that for us, a really good client is someone who is really connected to the project. So it's not just like a transactional experience where they're handing things over to the agency and saying, okay, go. Like there has to be a responsiveness. There has to be leadership and management from the client side of things so that the agency can do their work as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I would say like if they understand that, it's also likely that they understand that they need to do a lot and that we rely on them. And I think that's why, software development with agency business is so difficult. I like to describe it. It's like building a house with your client, and your client is often usually not the expert at building the house. So, I have a small Airbnb business with my wife, and we've gotten more into construction. And the easy part about that is that, we kind of basically do the general contracting ourselves, and we can go out and find a specialist. For instance, we found a specialist for deck building, and, we chose, him over the guy that was maybe more of a generalist and could do a lot of like things that were useful for us. But this was a pretty complicated deck, and we didn't want to take the risk on like the guy that hadn't built 100 decks. Right. And it was like a 2-story deck on like kind of a hill, and it's like, you don't want that thing to like not be supported correctly, right? So the thing is, they're going to just go build the deck. I don't have to be there. I don't have to support them. I don't have to give them requirements. And the reason the agency business is so hard is we can build you the house, but we can't really build you the house because there's so many details that we need from the client, and that client has to run the house. And it's not this standalone thing that just kind of sits there on its own that anyone can move into. It's something that only they can run because it's their business, right? If they want me to take over the business, they can go, hand over 100% of their equity, and I'll gladly take it. They can get their lawyer to sign off on me being the owner of their business for free if they want, but they don't want to do that, right?
No. So and so on the flip side, from a business point of view, what is kind of not perfect, but what's a really high quality agency? What are the characteristics?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think of what we would do is we try and pride ourselves in like building something that is long lasting and like kind of building forward momentum and infrastructure that's going to help the business scale. I think a lot of agencies just kind of like take the client's word and just like kind of crap things out because, they're getting paid to do that, but they're not necessarily thinking about like, how are we building this thing in a way that it's going to help the business grow and build infrastructure for the future. And I think any good agency has built things that like, maybe the client's still using 5-10 years later, or it was the stepping stone for the next thing that got them to the thing that's, got them to the next thing. And hopefully the agency's still there, or maybe it's not. In some cases we're not, but like, I've had clients come back from like 10 years ago that like some of the things we built for them were the stepping stone for what they're using now, Does that make sense? Or
so the long-term view, looking at kind of not just doing the building, but also understanding what they're going to need down the road, and kind of instilling that idea into whatever you're building for them today, so that down the road they can make the most of it.
Well, I think the other reason this stuff is so hard is that like a house, I'm going back to, because people understand construction, it's physical. Everyone lives in a house or an apartment, maybe they don't own it, but with our industry, what you build at best, like if you build something that lasts for 10 years, like either it's you've made so many successful iterations and agile improvements to it, or the client is just lazy and hasn't upgraded anything, which you see with like ERP systems, where you see that just like they're stuck on the green screen from 30 years ago and they just like won't change it. So you have to have that like forward thinking improvement mindset, because otherwise what you're building is just going to be like quickly obsolete or not going to scale, and it's going to break the business,
And what about from when a business is looking at an agency and, considering, okay, they've got these developers with all these skills, but what other aspects are kind of core to a high quality agency? You mentioned like project management. What other elements really should be part of that entire agency operation?
Like once again, it depends on the size and scale of the agency, right? I think that core, like the early stage, it's like you need at least someone to do project management, maybe a developer, maybe a marketer. It depends. If you're marketing, it's maybe some like you need the kind of communicator and organizer, project manager. You need the doers, which might be a handful of developers or marketing. And then you probably need like someone that's kind of doing business development and kind of helping bring in new business. I think that's like the early workings of an agency, right? Let's say like it's 5 people. It's like project manager, handful of doers, and maybe someone out there kind of like selling and generating new business. And then I think over time, it kind of evolves into more sophistication. Something that we've struggled with is like we've actually gone, I think in some cases, too specialized too quickly, where if you go too specialized, it creates more overhead and the client has to pay for like a lot of different, it's like an assembly row of things that has to happen to get something done. But if you don't go too specialized, you run into the issue that you're talking about, which is like one guy trying to do front end, back end, DevOps, QA, and it's like that can also lead to issues. So I think it depends on the size of the agency and figuring out that balance of like the level of specialization that they need per role at the size that they're at. And it's hard. I don't have like a perfect answer because we're constantly fine tuning that.
Yeah, I think that it is definitely a scale. As your business grows, you need more, and it also depends on how much you depend on your e-commerce um, environment. If it's 2% of your business, because you're old school B2B and you're not really ever going to change that, how much really do you need to invest in that? If it's 5% and you expect it to become 20%,
Well, I think it's a question of,
then
do they want it to grow? Like, do they want
yeah,
that 2% to get to 10%? And if they just don't care, then yeah, I mean, just throw up a, big commerce site that kind of runs its, SaaS, and it's a good B2B SaaS platform that probably doesn't cost them too much to run, right? So I think it's more about how aggressive are they with their vision of their business, right? And I think also a lot of businesses are lying to themselves, where they say they want to go from 2 to 10% or 10 to 20% e-commerce, and they're not serious about what it takes to get there.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yep, yeah. I think that's true. It's a big investment, and it's not like it's a long-term return, you know?
And you're gonna have some losses. You're gonna have
Yeah,
some months or some things that didn't work, but you have to just bake that into the growth. You have to be committed to that, like, multi-year digital transformation or kind of like culture shift in the business. And some months are gonna be not as good as other months, and you just have to kind of like, but you have to be like willing to kind of like get through all that.
yeah. One of the most important things I've felt about agency work and as a former merchant is just openness, open communication, honesty, candor.
Yeah.
No bullshit. Just really being upfront with each other from both sides, from the merchant to the agency and the agency back to the merchant.
I will
Is
tell
that
you one issue with that though that we've been playing with, because I think if an agency, I think the sad reality in the agency business is that in the upfront aspect of getting the deal, the more honest you are, the less likely you are to get the deal. And that's one
Yep.
thing in the sense that, and so I think agencies have been forced to lie to maintain their businesses, because there's so much bullshit, and the client's expectations is usually so far from reality that it's almost like you got to ease them into the truth. And until they're kind of like ingrained into the process and the working process of, let's say, months of working together, it's like they can't handle the truth, literally. And we've because you have to kind of like ease them into the reality of what their situation is.
Yeah, I have over the past few years developed a newfound respect for the sales process, because I found exactly what you're saying to be true, where like ethically, I just want to be everything out front, totally open book,
Do
no
that, you'll get zero
playing no
sales.
games. Yeah, exactly. But there's definitely a way to do it. It's exactly as you say. You ease in through these conversations. There's no lying. There's no pig in a poke
Yeah,
type
I'm
thing
not
that's
saying
going
go
on.
out and make a
But
bunch of
there's
bullshit claims, but
definitely
try to get them into this reality. They're not ready for it in one call.
right. It's very consultative. It's really, it usually involves several conversations, trust building, and there's an art to it. And yeah, like I said, I found a newfound respect for the sales effort. So yeah,
It's hard.
it is. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your insights. Hopefully this has helped some merchants understand a little bit of the kind of dynamics going on in selecting and working with an e-commerce agency. I know we love what we do, both from the folks over at Trellis and at IronPlane. And, we'll include some links in the show notes to the Trellis company, although it's pretty easy. It's just trellis.co, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty
Okay.
easy. We're waiting for the .co's to get more popular, so it's there's some success there, but I mean,
Yeah.
most of the .coms that are good are pretty hard to get.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, we'll invite you back when we have more conversations about e-commerce or agency work or platform selection, anything like that. So again, appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. The market's changing so fast. So six months from now, it'll be a whole new conversation.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Isaiah.
Thank you.
For more insights on how to improve your e-commerce website and for a free consultation, visit ironplane.com. Follow us on social media and like and subscribe below.